When a human is injured or even killed by a non-human, we can go one of two directions. We can learn and develop skills that will help us more successfully survive on a planet that does have dangerous animals besides ourselves, or we can kill everything that isn't us. No matter what side you fall on, there will be politicians there to manipulate your emotions for their gain. In 2014, while documenting political agendas behind shark culling in Australia, I met Dr. Christopher Neff and I asked him, could these ideas ever infect the United States? He not only predicted that Cape Cod would be the most likely place for shark culling to be proposed in the United States, but he pointed out that shark culling already has taken place in the United States. Watch the full video to learn more details from Dr. Christopher Neff. Side note on that, humans killed more humans in the amount of time it took me to make that opening statement than sharks will kill humans in the next decade. But let's go ahead and declare war on sharks. I'm a little bit worried that if our scientists or other people aren't re-educating people well enough, that misinformation from the Australian government, Western Australian government, could actually influence the governments of other countries.
The worry that what happens in Western Australia could influence other countries is completely true. I mean, I was hired by the Reunionese government to fly out to Reunion Island. And when I got there, all of the surfers said to me, they hunt and kill sharks in Western Australia. Why don't we do that here? And it came up time and time again that Western Australia is doing it. Australia has shark nets. Why don't we have shark nets? Western Australia has shark hunts. Why don't we have shark hunts? Queensland has drum lines. Why don't we have drum lines? And Australia is seen as the model for beach safety. It's the sunburnt country. It's the perfect surf lifesaver. Taking on the waves. And the simple fact is that reputation translates into shark control and translates into perceptions of how to respond to shark bites. And that ends up being a problem when the policies that they choose are barbaric, behind the times, or simply misinformed, which is what the current environment that we're in. And so when people are modeling bad behavior to expand it, we end up with a problem. Recife is looking at drum lines. They've also used shark nets there previously. We see an expansion of shark nets around the world, of additional locations who are picking them up and using these culling methods. So almost all of it is based on the models off of Australia. South Africa's nets and their drum lines in Durban are based on the Queensland nets. Queensland put its nets in 1957. Natal put its nets in 1962. Pardon me. Can I redo that?
Yeah.
That's not entirely accurate.
Let me
reattach here. The two were modeled on each other. I'm wrong about the drum lines went in. I'll say it differently, but the fact is that the two groups work together on it.
I heard that. Well, heard. Okay.
You want me to just fix that?
Yeah.
The Queensland nets and drum lines were used as the basis for the Natal nets and drum lines. So the two of those programs are intimately related, even though the nets in Durban are much longer than they are in Queensland. So the gear isn't identical, but the methods in using a mixed gear approach is the same.
Is there any reason for concern that this changing of policy will make its way all the way over to the United States, where we haven't had shark mitigation policies to date?
I honestly don't think so. In the U.S., the biggest policy there is swim at your own risk, and that's a liability policy that's been put in place regarding, heavy surf, jet ski. If you get hit by a jet ski, struck by lightning, or bitten by a shark, it all falls into the same category. And the fact is that for our purposes, they're treating them all as accidents and not giving special agency or power to, the monster shark story. And that is actually really valuable here. So the fact is that there's a strong liability history and litigious nature to American beach going that is pretty solid, and I wouldn't expect to see them do that. But I would note just quickly that that hasn't always been the case. Both you had shark control in Hawaii, obviously, for almost 20 years, and you've had shark hunts in Hawaii, and you've also had the first fisheries data that ever came in the North Atlantic came in because fisheries was asked to lay long lines off the coast of New Jersey because of fear of sharks. So, and that's really where fisheries data about sharks started to come from.
So is this presented as though they're actually trying to do it for science, but in reality?
No, it was they were trying to do it, and then they realized in doing it that it could be used for fisheries, but it was done specifically just to kill sharks because they were afraid of a shark bite near a beach.
So the first long lining,
yes,
instilled by the fisheries department that scientists now use data from, was for shark mitigation.
That's correct. I mean, Sydney used to hire Japanese shark finners. Shark finning used to be a method of beach safety, and they did that in the 60s.
Because that's a way to make money off of it at the same time?
It's a good way to get the fishermen interested. You can kill the shark, it's a win-win. You kill the shark, fin them, keep the fins, and we're all safer for it. That was the theory.
What if the United States had the fatality rate that Australia does? We have a high rate of incidences, but not the same rate of fatalities. Think things might change?
I think, I hope not.
I don't really think of the United States as a take responsibility for yourself place anymore. It's pretty much sue everyone else, and it's everyone else's responsibility to make a good decision for you.
It's tricky. I went to Cape Cod, which is probably the place that's the most likely. If there's any location that's going to have a fatality, it's probably going to be Cape Cod. So I went to Cape Cod and I approached National Park Service and had a good meeting with them and other stakeholders. And because they don't have a shark problem in Cape Cod, they have a seal problem. They have seals that don't have an island. They're beach seals. So they've got 30,000 new beach seals that swim through the surf. So they're swimming by people. I asked how often the seals swim through the swim area, and they said every 10 minutes. So if you go in the water around Cape Cod in the summertime, you're swimming near seals. They've taken over the entirety of the arm. And so that's probably the most likely place that you would end up having something happen. And the simple fact is I, having had that conversation with them a year after they had a shark bite where someone was bitten, I think they are able to separate the movie myths from the reality of sharks. And if there was a tragedy, I think that there would be real resistance to a shark hunt. And because I think that's probably the most likely scenario that we would see in an American context.
It's interesting that you say Cape Cod is the most likely, even though California has had an unfortunate number of attacks recently.
When California, they've got the one beach, the Air Force beach, Vandenberg Air Force beach, that has had 2 fatalities at the same beach, and within a short period of time, just within about a year. But again, that beach in particular is not a recreational beach per se. It's more isolated, and so if you go out into that in that context, there are lots of risks that you take in when you go out there. You really are in someone else's domain. I think the difference with a Florida or with a Cape Cod is that we're talking about recreational beaches, tourist beaches with tourist dollars, and the question is whether or not there's pressure to maintain tourism. The Vandenberg Air Force Base is not a tourist beach, and I think that plays a huge role in the way in which it's viewed.
Well, that's interesting because tourism is used as an excuse by Western Australia for implementing the drumlines. In fact, Mr. Hunt's letter says national interest, economics of tourism, yet not initiating shark mitigation is also used to promote tourism in Florida. Who's wrong there? Whose responsibility is it to stand up and say the government is wrong? Stop misinforming people.
I mean, the hope would be that you don't need to tell the government that what it's doing is wrong. But the simple fact is that sometimes you do need to stand up to the government. And I think the failure of reporters to be more critical, I think the failure of scientists to be more assertive on what is clearly false science, and the failure of opposition movements within politics to combat against parties in power is a problem. You know, you have opposition parties that are also afraid to say that they're wrong because they don't want to be blamed either. And so shark bites may not be governable, but they are blamable. And so you see a lot of activity that happens on the basis of that.